All right. So I think that we should be now in the middle of Mishnah 18, Rabbi Shimon. And his middle statement of his three statements. The first one is to be scrupulous, to be careful, to be mindful, whatever the words are about reciting Kriyat Shema and prayer, specifically the Amidah prayer. And now he goes into prayer itself. And he says, and when you pray, right? And now we have, let's get a couple of translations here. So the first, pretty much, again, let's remind ourselves, the usual translation that we have for most people before we get to the Rabbi Shapiro translation. So that's, yeah, okay, Sarita, great.
Regard not thy prayer as a fixed mechanical task.
Wait, what's this phrase before that?
Oh, and when thou prayest,
okay.
Well, before that it says, be careful to read the Shema to say the Amidah, right? When thou prayest, regard not thy prayer as a fixed mechanical task, but as an appeal for mercy and grace before the all-present, as it is said,
as it says what?
Oh, for he is gracious and full of mercy, slow to anger, and abounding in loving kindness, and relenteth him of the evil.
Okay, that's the middle teaching, and then we have a final teaching. Okay, and Josie, you're here. So do you have your Rabbi Shapiro in front of you?
It says, you want the verse before it? Be mindful reciting.
No, I don't want that. We don't want to be mindful of that.
Okay. Do not pray from rote, but seek compassion and surrender before God. As it is said, God is gracious, compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in kindness, and resentful of punishment.
Resentful of punishment. So we have a little bit of a change there.
Yeah.
In that last description about punishment. What was the one that Sarita had?
That was and relenteth him of the evil.
Right, relenting of the evil. Okay.
Right, but the part is, I mean, after the mechanical stuff and the road stuff is the same, it sounds like, but here mine it says, but as an appeal for mercy and grace, doesn't have the word surrender or whatever. Yeah.
So good. So that's why we have these two translations at least. So it gives us a little bit more material to think about. So the first teaching says, pay attention. You've got to say Shema, you've got to pray, right? Now he says, okay, so now that I've gotten you to pray, how do you do it? So any comments about this? Any reactions?
Well,
yeah, great.
Well, he's saying have
Greg raised his hand. Yeah.
He's saying don't let it just be keva. Have some kavanah when you're praying.
Okay, so those are two good Hebrew words, but what do they mean?
Again, the way I understand it, keva is just the rote reciting of the prayers, and I know there are plenty of people that that say that that's sufficient, but to kavanah is to have an intention, to have an intention that you're actually praying. You're not just mumbling the words, and as an obligation you have. Although I suppose that's an intention also, but think about the prayers. You're having a conversation with God. Be part of, engage in the conversation. Don't just mouth the words mindlessly. Okay.
Yeah, Sarita.
I always liked our alternative service. I forget what we ended up calling it, but anyway, because even we didn't say every single prayer, but we really delved into what the prayers meant. And I found that, to me, that seems that this is what this is talking about is, really knowing what it is you're saying when you pray.
Okay, so I don't know if somebody else raised their hand. Beryl is down there, but she disappeared. Anybody else? What's keva means fixed, right? So like, for instance, we say likboa mezuzah, to affix a mezuzah. It means to nail it in place, or to, set it in place so that it doesn't move. So that's keva. So what Craig was mentioning is that the idea of keva is we've got set prayers, right? And in a certain sense, I mean, this is part of what this discussion is about. What's our attitude to those set prayers, right? Here he's saying, don't make your prayers just set, right? The translations that we had, again, Sarita's translation was?
A fixed mechanical task.
Right, so the word fixed is the literal translation, and then mechanical task is already editorial interpretation, right? Don't make it fixed. On the one hand, you have to pray. Pay attention, you got to pray. That's teaching number one. Now, the second thing is, but when you pray, let it not be mechanical, let it not be rote is the translation we had also, right? So what is our experience? What's our attitude to the formulas that we have set down for us in our printed prayer books? What function do they play for us? Are they helpful? Are they something to be avoided? I mean, I try to make space when we do the Amida specifically, to say to people, it's quiet, it's silent prayer, right? And there's a reason for that, because nobody's checking up on you about whether you're saying these words or not. So I kind of open the door for people to choose different things. But I'll tell you a secret, I say every word. So what function do the words themselves play for us, if anybody wants to share? Nick.
Well, I think they create a possibility.
Rosie, he raised his hand.
I think they create a possibility for prayer. I mean, I remember walking into the synagogue for the first time in my adult life and opening the prayer book, and I think it was the alternative version of the Amidah, which says, "Help me, O God, to pray," or something like that. And I was just like, yes, help me to pray. It was wonderful. It gave me a language to begin to pray with. So every time I read a prayer in synagogue, I'm often struck by the fact that I've read it many times, but discovered something new in it. And it's because it speaks to a different part of me at a different time in my life. But more than anything, I think the prayers are an opening to prayer.
Okay, Josie, I think you've been trying to say something.
I'm
Right,
always
yeah,
struck
but-
by that line in the prayer book, I don't remember where, that it said our ancestors really turned to you and really, to me, took Judaism seriously and helped me get some of that attitude into my prayer and my life.
So you may be referring to the blessing that we recite right before the Shema. It might be there, where we sing the words a lot of times. Ava, Abba, Avtanu. You loved us a great love, and for the sake of our ancestors, to
Yes.
whom you taught Chukei Chayim, the rules of life, right? So please be with us also and teach us how to observe and how to learn and how to teach and how to perform. So maybe that's what's resonating with me about what you're saying.
Yeah,
You
but
did it for our
really,
ancestors, and now we need it for ourselves too.
yeah, is that they had a much stronger connection to our faith and practice than many of us do. That always struck me.
That might be wishful thinking, but sometimes it's useful. Yeah, Carolyn.
Well, I sort of agree with Josie and with Nick. With respect to each time I read a prayer, sometimes it's more meaningful, or a certain word or a certain phrase will mean more. But also, I feel like but when I'm saying so I add my own stuff in between. But I also feel like when I read the exact words, that it connects me to my family and the people before me, some of whom I didn't even know, because I know they said the same words in the same prayer. And so to me, that's a connection with them also. And I agree with you, Rabbi, that not necessarily all the people who came before us were as more observant than some of us were as well. But it's like a continuum for me, and I feel that connection. When I say the prayers, it's, these are the same prayers my grandfather said or my great grandfather said, and that's important to me. But also that each time I read it, it might mean something different as well.
When we had the alternative service, AKA the Avodah Shabalev service, AKA pure and simple, AKA whatever, we kept on trying to package it different kinds of ways. I would give out, if people wanted to use it, a little sheet. It's an 8.5 by 11 sheet folded in half. And I printed on it the basic blessing of each blessing of the Amidah, but in a box. And the box was an empty box. The idea was to give a graphic representation of the fact that you can fill this box with whatever it is that you want. But when Craig was talking before about kavanah as opposed to keva, and this is a classic, there's a little bit of a connection in the Hebrew in the sound, keva, kavanah, even though they're completely spelled totally differently, they're from totally different words. But the idea of intent, of focus, of direction, kavanah means to direct one's thoughts, to direct one's feelings in a certain way, to try to make space for that, to try to fill that up. The word in Hebrew for a word, here in Hebrew has sometimes more than one word for things, but one word is teva. A teva is a word. It's also a box. So for instance, the teva is used in the Torah to talk about two different boxes. The box that Noah went into during the flood, Tevat Noach, Noah's Ark. And it's also used for Moses when he's floating on the Nile as a little baby, that he's in this teva. So it's a box, a container, and it's also a word. So the Hasidic masters said every word is really not just a couple of letters. It's a container. It's an open vessel that you can put your thoughts into. So you can put your emotions into. So I think that, I haven't heard anybody say this, but my impression is, and this is not just us, it's a lot of generations already. A lot of times the prescribed prayers don't feel like a container. They feel like a barrier. They feel like a solid wall that don't let us get to wherever it is that we want to go. And there have been all kinds of efforts. How do we soften up that wall? How do we open, gateways through the wall, breaches of the wall, tear down that wall, and get someplace else where we can actually be authentically honest about our prayers. So there's a lot of people that have over the years felt that there's a contradiction, that there is a conflict between our written prayers, our traditional prayers, and what we might want to say if we could. So, meditative services, and of course, when we did those alternative services, the idea was take some of the prescribed prayers, and by eliminating so much more, make more space to slowly be able to let those words mean something or do what we hope that they might do. So I haven't heard people say it here, but so I'll say it. The traditional prayers for a lot of people are not helpful. They're a struggle. Or sometimes, it's sad. It's, Rabbi, I read the translation. I've been saying these words for, my whole life. I finally read the translation. I don't want to say these words. These are words that I don't really, want to pray. So when I ask what the function is of the written words, it's complicated. Somehow or other, there are a lot of written words. They got, it's not like by accident that we've got, a few standard prayers. We've got a lot of prayers that have been codified and been preserved and sanctified. So there is some kind of, feeling that's been working in the Jewish people over history that says it's really important not to just leave this to everybody's spontaneous, inspiration, or let everybody just pray any way you want. It's really important not to leave it like that, because, that's a good question. Why? So that's it. That's, why that is, we could think about. But there's been a tremendous effort to put the words of prayer into our mouths, rather than let us just invent them anytime we want, in any way that we want. So what's the concern there? What is the, what's this determination to create a gigantic project full of words, full of prayers, full of different kinds of prayers? Why not just let people, say what's on their mind and in their heart? Nick?
Well, I think it had something to do with us as a people, that the written prayers bind us together as a people, wherever we are.
Couldn't we just have like a few binding prayers?
Well, but as I said before, each prayer is a possibility for a different possibility. There's just the prayer, simple prayer of putting on the talit, the blessing before the talit. I don't know. I relate to that differently quite often each time I do it, and so I don't know. I think it tries to cover a lot. I mean, it has this possibility, this possibility, this possibility.
You do.
Josie?
I find it's easy to do both, to say the prayer the way it's written, even if I'm using the transliteration and I don't know the Hebrew, and then have my own personal prayer during the silent Amidah, or sometime in my own schedule during the day, every day. I mean, there's nothing says you can't do both.
Yeah.
Right. The Mishnah says that the ancient ones, the early, and in the Mishnah, they're saying the people before us would spend an hour getting ready for prayer. Then they would spend an hour praying, and then they would spend an hour processing the experience of the prayer. Right? And then they would go to work at dawn. So there's, how much space can you make for this stuff is a question, and modern life not a friend for prayer, is not something that helps us out. Did somebody else want to say something I didn't see? Yeah, go ahead, Merle.
I've said this many times before, or I don't know if it's in this class and I've asked you about it, but it seems to me that what I observe in synagogue is in direct opposition to do not make your prayer a set routine. When I observe people during the Emunah, let's say, and that's a long series of prayers, people who know Hebrew and who grew up with an observant background, they say that they know the prayer. They probably read it just because they're supposed to read it, but they know it by heart, and they say it very quickly to get the whole few pages in. But how can they be thinking about anything other than just and you know, I don't get it. I still don't get that.
Yeah, I think that your question has been, you know, the underlying a lot of critique over many years. We've started reading Haftarot in our Torah study for the Torah portion. Instead of reading the Torah portion itself, we give a little background of what the Torah portion is, and then we've been paying attention to the prophets who say different things, and we've selected different things to tie into the Torah portion. But what the prophets asked your question also. The prophets have said it, you know, Isaiah says it, and what's with this, you know, lip service? What's with this sacrificing? You think you're going to do a sacrifice, and then you're done with it. You think that you're gonna, you know, just you know, say thank you to God, and you don't really mean it. This criticism has been going on for over 2,500 years. So there's something very human about wanting to have some kind of rote, predictable way of depending on something, and then unfortunately losing the spirit of it in the grasping of the, you know, the repetitious use of the word or of the practice. There's something very comforting about it, and there's also something very deadening that could happen about it. You know, there's some people have pointed out that these kinds of traditional, you know, religious practices bear a little similarity to kind of OCD behavior. You know, obsessive compulsive. What's the D? Disorder. Thank you. Right. So, you know, this idea, I got to do it again. 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 You know, so, you know, it's, everybody's chuckling. I mean, OCD is a terrible torture to suffer from, because you really are desiring some kind of security, some kind of certainty, some kind of stability, some kind of order in your life that takes away the threat of the chaos that you feel. So you do it, and then for maybe a microsecond it works, but then you got to do it again because it wore off, and then you got to do it again because it wore off. It's very painful, but it comes out of a really deep human need that we all have. And some of us just, you know, are better at forgetting about it half the time, right? That the world is a mess, and that how do we straighten it out for ourselves? How do we reassure ourselves? We don't have time that much this time to go into the second part of this phrase, but before, so you know, what is the attitude that Rabbi Shimon is advocating? We'll get to that hopefully next time. But some of you have had, you've told me, you've shared with me, you've had the joy of discovering a different Siddur, of discovering a prayer book that isn't the prayer book that you've been used to. we had as a community, when we changed our machzor for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, a lot of people just felt, wow, this is great. And they felt, almost exhilarated by this new volume, which, 95% of it is the same old boring words that you used to have in the old volume. But, so is it the packaging that's different? Obviously, it was created because the people were conscious of the fact that we're struggling. We're all struggling. And the attempts that they put into making a new Siddur, yes, there was an aesthetic component to it. Let's make it feel good in the hand. It's got this like nice feeling, kind of, I don't know, leatherette kind of cover. And then the idea that, of course, the typeface and they add more transliteration. And the major thing that everybody noticed is the commentaries along the margins, right? Oh, now I can finally see what this is about. So people are nodding their heads, right? So for next time, maybe we can talk a little bit about that. What's the effect of having a different Siddur? For next time, Merle, that's going to be part of.
I just have one sentence.
Yeah, okay.
The Nehalel Sidurs that you showed me, that's a great example of what you're talking about, because you can get completely absorbed in not just the text, but how the beautiful photograph relates to the text, and kind of it's like a wonder.
Right. We could remind us next time. The Siddur that Merle is talking about is not a Siddur that has commentary of words. It has commentary of photographic images. So it was created by a photographer and who wanted to create a Siddur where highlighting pieces of each prayer with an image would be the way to increase people's engagement in Kavanah. So I can share that a little bit with you next time. Okay, to be continued. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.